Welcome everybody. This is about music licensing and BMI. Before I hand it over to Dan and Dean, I thank you so much. BMI has been such a great supporter of us. I first saw Dan, I don't know what year, GABF, 2019 or just 18 CBC maybe, or whatever. He gave this talk similar. And the only reference that any of us ever really knew about BMI were those letters, those threatening letters that you would get. And how much calls I would get about this. And I saw Dan speak, and he made sense of everything. And I said, you know what, brewers need to hear the why, and you know, Dan will give you tips about things, about how to handle this sort of thing. And I'm like, please come to our conference. I was just hoping he would come and speak. And so he goes one step further and says, here, let me get you some music acts. Let me get you a BMI artist. And so he's been so generous with BMI, and the message is good, and I'm happy to have you, and I'm happy to have Dean here as well. So I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. And,
let me interrupt before you start. In true artist fashion, we're starting 10 minutes late. Sorry, everyone.
4 minutes late. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your friendship, your partnership, for the opportunity to be with you all. This is not a sting operation. Anything that's spoken here will remain in a safe zone. I'm not here to bust anybody or whatever. This is about trying to give you knowledge about a very confusing industry so that the next time you have a conversation with one of those acronyms, including BMI, you'll feel a little more powerful understanding the system, because it can be very daunting, and fear definitely plays a role in some of the tactics that some of the organizations in this industry utilize. And the more you know, the more you'll be able to battle some of those tactics. So I'm Dan Spears. I've been with BMI for, gosh, almost 34 years. I've worked in all forms of licensing, and in the last few years have tried to really form partnerships with the Brewers associations to do exactly what I'm doing now, is provide education, support, consultation on all of those rather complicated issues related to music in your breweries. And today I thought it would be great to have a brewer's perspective. So Dean has become a close friend of mine the last year or two. Of course, everybody knows Treehouse Brewing. You all know about their beer, but perhaps you don't know that they consume a lot of live music. They really integrate music into their brand. And so in a minute, we're going to talk to Dean a little bit about his live music program. He can talk more about his history, how music became a part of their brand, and a little bit more about the Treehouse way of doing business when it comes to live music. But first, we're going to delve into some stuff that I know at first glance will seem very legalistic, because it is, because everything we talk about is based upon the copyright law. And so I am going to have to cover some stuff that may seem painful, but I'll try and make it as easy to digest as possible. Now, anybody that works for BMI or anybody that's in the music industry would not be worth their salt if they did not start a presentation with music. So I'm not going to be that guy. Starting a presentation with music on a subject matter that relates to music, there's a method to my madness here, and that is so much of what BMI is all about and some of these other organizations are all about is are really the anonymous names behind so much of the music that's been written. Now, that song has been covered, as you saw, by some of the most legendary acts in the music business, yet two unknown guys named Phil Medley and Burt Russell wrote that song. And I think that kind of sets the tone for this presentation, and that much of what we're talking about here is compensating the behind-the-scenes songwriter. Yeah, there are a lot of artists out there that write their own music, but so much of that music you hear was not written by the artist, but by someone who relies upon some of these licensing fees we're going to be talking about to make a living. So we'll take a few minutes to talk about the music copyrights within the copyright law, so you at least understand the general landscape, what's licensable in your brewery that you need to be concerned about. We'll talk about those performing rights organizations that call you relentlessly, aggressively, who they are, how they operate, what they represent, so that when you speak to them, you'll feel like you have more knowledge of who they are and what they're all about. And then we're going to bring Dean in, and we're going to talk about the whole booking process, how he does it at his brewery, some tips perhaps on how you can start a live music program or continue one that you might have in place. And then I'm also going to talk about a partnership we have with an online booking company called Gigmore to perhaps allow you to scale the concept of live music in your brewery. But first, the fun part, the copyright part. I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up, just because these are three rights within the copyright law that, believe it or not, play a role kind of in your day-to-day, but maybe not in your business. The synchronization right. Now, these are all rights that are held by the publisher and the songwriter. A publisher is someone who owns the copyright to the song. A publisher is like an agent for a song. A publisher brings life to a song. So one way that a song is brought to life is through movies, film, television shows, commercials, where music is integrated into those particular media. That's called the synchronization right. When someone wants to do that, they must go to the publisher, which owns the copyright, and get permission to add that song to whatever they're producing. When they negotiate a fee for that, 50% will go to the copyright holder, which is the publisher, 50% will go to the songwriter. And most people would say, why would a songwriter give away their copyright? Because originally the songwriter does own the copyright when they compose a song. But songs that don't see life, that don't get put into a movie or a television show or recorded by an artist, will never get a revenue stream. So in exchange for getting life to that song, they give the copyright away to the publisher who, as I said, works as an agent, works the catalog of music that they represent. Then there's the right of reproduction, or what are known as the mechanical royalties, also held by the publisher and songwriter. When a song is downloaded, when a song is streamed, when a song is sold via physical product like vinyl and even CDs these days, 9.1 cents per song is split between the publisher and the songwriter. Now that doesn't equate to a lot of money because no one's buying albums anymore. So in order for you to make money through a mechanical royalty, you really have to have a single that comes off of that album. It used to be years ago, the mechanical royalty was a big source of income for a songwriter. If you got on a George Strait album, you were golden because those things were multi-platinum. But today, not so much because it's a singles world. It's not an album world. So that leads us to the public performance right, which is why we're all here and why this is germane to your business. The public performance right is when a song is played publicly, not privately at home, when you've got a party at your house or you've got a wedding at the country club. It's a public performance of music, and we're going to talk more about that and what it really means. Live music in a bar, in your yoga class, streamed on Spotify, played on your local radio station, fitness club. That's the public performance of music. And when that happens, the songwriter and publisher are entitled to royalties. What is considered licensable under the public performance definition in the copyright law? Commercial radio station that you might be airing. Of course, live music is the most obvious application. If you've got a DJ that comes in and spins records, that's public performance. Karaoke. If you have your television set on, this is something that people don't understand and don't think is right. But the copyright law says that if you've got TVs on in your brewery and you have the audio turned up, any audio that comes out of that television is your responsibility. Now, I know you would think, oh, well, the deal I have with Charter Communications or DirecTV would cover that. That's not what the copyright law says. Yes, the video is covered by any business license or commercial license you have with DirecTV, but not the audio. So music coming out of a football game or a commercial or a movie that you might be airing, that's your responsibility. Buffalo Wild Wings is a great example. They're a big BMI customer because they consume a lot of music through their audio that comes out of their television sets. Now, there's an exception to the public performance of music when it comes to you all having to take licenses out and be responsible for that. And that's the commercial music business, the commercial music service, the background music that you might have in your brewery. You contract out with Pandora for Business, contract your brand, Muzak. There's literally hundreds of subscription-based businesses. They pay BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, who we'll talk about in a minute, on your behalf, so you don't have to. So if you don't have anything in your brewery except commercial music from your background music service, then you don't have to do anything. You're done. You're good. It's only when these other forms of music, live music through artists, bands, karaoke, that sort of thing. Now, if you're streaming your own personal account, your own personal Spotify playlists into your brewery, that's different. You're responsible for that. You have to take a license out. You have to have a commercial license with one of these background music services in order for your fees to be covered. So this is kind of the circle of life and how it works at a company like BMI that represents about 50% of the music that you're playing in your breweries. A songwriter early in their career will affiliate with BMI. And why wouldn't they? It's free. Our job is to simply make sure songwriters' rights are protected and they're fairly compensated. We then go out and represent that right on behalf of the songwriters and publishers. So this kind of goes against the grain from how I led this whole conversation, in that all those names are familiar to you, but I figured if I put up 12 anonymous names, that would mean nothing to you. So I'm going to list some more high-profile songwriters that happen to be artists. But they affiliate with BMI. So Taylor Swift affiliates with BMI at the age of about 14. We then go out and license all the businesses that use her music. We track those performances through Shazam technology, through another form of tracking called BMI Live, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then we make royalty distributions every quarter to our songwriters and publishers. So we call that the circle of life at BMI. Now, this, I think, is one of the most important parts of the presentation, because this is where you're most confused when you open up a brewery and you start having live music. You thought you were covered because you were paying the band $300 to come in and perform. Well, you are paying the band for their musicianship and for their performance, but you're not compensating the songwriters affiliated with those songs. So there are organizations that were created, and I'll talk a little bit about the history of them, in order to represent that public performance right on behalf of the songwriter. Because as much as you might hate these organizations, in the end they actually make your life easier, because the copyright law says that you are responsible for every piece of music that is publicly performed in your brewery. So you'd have to go to every single one of those publishers and songwriters to get permission for that. But because of these performing rights organizations, you can get blanket agreements with all of them and get access to their entire catalog. We lead with ASCAP because they're the oldest. They're a membership-based society, founded in 1914. When they first were created, obviously they represented the kinds of music you might expect, the George Gershwins, the Stephen Fosters, right? They're a not-for-profit company, membership-based society. So their board is made up of songwriters and publishers. And they were the only game in town for quite a while, until the late 1930s, when the broadcasters, when I say broadcasters, I primarily mean the radio industry, because that's what was very prevalent in the 1930s. They started getting a little irritated because ASCAP was a monopoly, and they started raising their rates by 100% every year because they could. The other thing ASCAP was prohibiting from happening is these new forms of music were coming on the scene. I don't know if any of you have ever watched Ken Burns' documentary on country music, but if you have, you know about the influx of music from Appalachia, which ultimately became country music, or race music, which ultimately became R&B. These things were all happening in the 1930s, but because ASCAP had a very strict requirement on who could join the organization, meaning you had to have at least 2 established hits on the radio to be a member, all these new forms of music, it was a catch-22, because they couldn't join ASCAP because they didn't have hits on the radio, and they couldn't get their music on radio because radio didn't have any copyright compliance mechanism with which to compensate them. So the radio industry got together and said, you know what, let's create our own company. We'll bring the rates down, we'll create a competitive music source, and we'll have an open door policy. We'll welcome these Appalachian songwriters, these songwriters that later on would be known as the Muddy Waters of the world and the Little Richards. And so BMI was credited really early on to having a lot to do with the explosion of music on the American scene during those years. You know, that's why BMI's catalog is so rich with the Chuck Berrys, the rock, the R&B. And we are a not-for-profit company as well. 90 cents of every dollar we collect from you goes to the songwriters and publishers. ASCAP and BMI, and this is important for you to know, operate under Justice Department consent decrees. What that means is, it means a lot of things, but the only thing that really matters to you all is that we cannot negotiate with you the fees. We must treat similarly situated businesses in a similar fashion. And so that's why we have industry contracts, and the fees are what they are. BMI represents about 50% plus of the music out there. ASCAP a little less, maybe in the 40s. So those are the two big ones. It's pretty tough to not have licenses with both of those organizations. Now, the third company that you all, I'm sure, are familiar with, if you've been in the live music game, is called CSAC. And they are a for-profit company. They're owned by a venture capital firm. And they are very aggressive. Most of the people that would reach out to you don't work for CSAC. They're independent contractors, so they're not terribly concerned about customer service. They're mostly concerned about getting a license from you and moving on. Now, CSAC, I'm not disrespecting them because they're in the same business as we are, protecting the rights of songwriters, but their model is completely different. They're for-profit. We don't really know how much money they keep and then pay the songwriters and publishers. What we do know is they represent about 5% of the music out there, and they've got some fairly high-profile artists and bands like Green Day and some others. So you do need to talk to them because there's a good chance that that music is being performed in your brewery. However, when you do talk to them, you can negotiate with them because they don't operate under a consent decree. ASCAP and BMI are restricted by law from negotiating with you. These guys are not. So if ASCAP is offering you a rate of $375 a year, BMI's is $375, and CSAC comes to you and says, oh, we want to charge you $275, then you push back because their catalog is probably 10% of what BMI's is. And so understanding that when you have conversations with them, I think will benefit you when you say, hey, listen, I respect your reason for existence. I'm probably playing your music and I'm happy to engage in a license agreement, but not at a rate that you're quoting. I want a rate that's commensurate with what's being performed in my brewery. And in this organization, I'm not going to go into them too much because I don't know if anybody have ever been contacted by Global Music Rights, but it was created in 2013 by Irving Azoff. You may know who he is. Very high-profile music executive, managed the Eagles for many years. He said, I'm going to create a company, and I'm going to make sure that my songwriters get paid more than any songwriter has ever gotten paid, because I think they've been devalued over the years. And he took Bruce Springsteen and convinced him to move over from ASCAP, Bruno Mars, Pharrell Williams, and created a pretty impressive lineup. Nonetheless, they only have about 4% of the market. Again, if they do come calling, and they quote you very aggressive rates, you can push back. They're for-profit. They don't operate under a Justice Department consent decree. I don't know that you'll hear from GMR. They've mostly been going after the low-hanging fruit, like the radio industry, which they just finished a negotiation with that involved a lot of lawsuits over the years. Very quickly, the international societies that we represent are all the equivalents of BMI in other countries. So if you're playing music from like from Ireland or any other country, be assured that when you have a license agreement with BMI, you also have agreements to play music from international societies represented by them as well. I want to just always mention this for those of you that do have a BMI license in place and are members of the Brewers Association. You do get a discount by virtue of your membership with the BA. 5% for being a member, 5% for paying online, and 10% for I just wrote that in there, for paying up front, not being up front. Being up front's a good thing, though, too. You should get credit for that as well. This is something that I also want to mention before we get into a conversation with Dean, and that is if you are in the business of compensating local singer-songwriters who are coming in every Thursday night and playing their hearts out, and you're big on supporting them, which I think many of you are, you got to make sure that if they're affiliated with BMI or ASCAP or even CSAC, that they need to make sure that they upload their set lists at the end of the night to their respective performing rights organization. Because I'll speak to our program. BMI is a program whereby when that local singer-songwriter is not playing cover songs but playing their own original songs, they're not going to get paid if they're not making sure that those songs are uploaded to our server so we know that it was played at, at Saranac Brewing. Because right now, if we don't get those, if we don't get that information, we're going to take your licensing fees and pay it out based upon radio airplay on the popular music that we use to track through Shazam. So please, if you have artists, songwriters coming in and playing regularly at your brewery, make sure that they upload their music to BMI Live. Again, I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. It's really important for you to know, and I think this resonates with this group and this audience probably more so than any audience that I speak with, because you guys are in the business of brewing, you're artists, you're crafting great recipes that are important to your business, to your livelihood. And songwriters are in the same boat. This is what they do for a living. They craft songs. And so just understand that if you understand anything after this presentation, yes, your lawyer probably said get a license. If you don't, you'll be sued for copyright infringement. There is a degree of truth to that. But more importantly, when you pay BMI, you're supporting the creative process. You're allowing songwriters to continue to make a living and put food on their table. And I just think that's always important to emphasize, and also to thank you all for those that are BMI licensees and are paying fees. I promise you it doesn't go unnoticed, and it's greatly appreciated. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the whole process of bringing live music into your brewery. So Dean, why don't you just talk a little bit about yourself first and how you kind of came into the game of almost being a professional booker. I mean, it's a big part of your job at Treehouse.
Yeah, it's probably 80% of my job at this point is booking talent. Hi, I'm Dean from Treehouse Brewing Company. And I'll tell you what I've told people already is I've really enjoyed meeting a lot of the New York crew. I don't get to come up this way very often, and it's been a pleasure for the past day and a half to meet some of you. With that being said, Dan asked me to come and just be a voice of, I'm not a brewer, I'm a brewery owner. You guys, you people that brew beer are so much more talented than I could ever think about being. But what I do is I book all of the talent that comes in place, and we have a pretty robust music program in our Charlton facility where we'll have Friday nights music, and we'll have two bands. We'll have a band on Saturday in the afternoon, and then a band on Saturday in the evening. Which to make those bookings and keep that rolling all the time it's a pretty heavy load. And when we first started doing it, who knew anything about music licensing? And I'm sure that some of you are, or still are in that boat. You just hire a band and you have a band. We're licensed through the town, right? We have an entertainment license. Well, what else do we really need? And then for me, that exact scenario happened. I got a letter from CSAC that said, we are going to sue you for the retro time that you haven't been paying music licensing. And I said, this is crazy. I said, I've been paying my bands and doing all that kind of thing and paying my fee to the town to have music in my building. And then I started doing some research, and it just so happened that almost at that same time, I had heard Dan speaking at the Mass Brewers Guild. And I said, well, this is all making sense. And started on the journey, and I pay all four. Just the music that we do, it's worth it for us to pay all four of the, and there's a fifth, but we don't pay the fifth.
There's not a viable fifth.
Yeah, there's a fifth, and they reach out, but we don't pay them. Sorry. He said be upfront, so I'm being upfront. Yeah, so basically booking music comes through, for me, booking music just comes through word of mouth. We had started a pretty good music program through just friends having bands and knowing bands, and I had been in bands my whole life, and both my partners play music, and we play music together, so you get to know a lot of music people and build a pretty robust list of good bands. And if you do have a music program at your breweries and your tap rooms and any of those venues, you know that it's a pretty important thing to really vet the people that are coming in and playing at your building, in your facilities, just to make sure that those people are going to create the correct vibe in your facility. And when I do that becomes it becomes a pretty big job. There's 250 to 300 bands a year that are reaching out to want to play at Treehouse, and you got to give them all a fair shake, give them a listen.
What's the process that you put out there as to how a local artist can
It generally, yeah. It's generally going to the info at Treehouse. They'll reach out to Treehouse, and from there, that person gets in touch with me, and we have a whole form that once you do reach out to Treehouse to try to become a performer there, you have to send live performance video. I don't want to listen to your latest album that you created in the studio, and then you come in with three different players that didn't play in the studio, and you're not the same artist. So we have live performance video that I have to see of each artist that wants to come and play, and basically vet them that way. As a matter of fact, today I was showing Dan, I got an email from just a guy in a band, just emailed my personal email and said, "Hey, I'd love to play. I think we'd be good at the brewery." I'm like, yeah, well, I've got to see something. I got to hear something. I can't just say, I think you would. You play 70s stuff? Okay, cool, come play at Brewery.
Now, do you require that they, as part of this application process, do they need to prove to you they can come in fully operational?
Fully geared.
They got to bring their own backline, their own sound?
Yeah, and I'm strictly talking about the tap room experience in our Charlton facility, and that's exactly how we have it now. When we first started, because I had played in bands and we were musicians, I said, let's get a house system, right? And then the bands are just going to be able to come in, plug in, and play. How great was that when I was in a band, when I could just plug in and play? But there's a whole set of things that come with having your house system, and not every band has the same equipment that plugs into your equipment. Not every band knows how to run a system, so then you have to have a sound person.
So you make that a prerequisite?
So our prerequisite now, yeah, is exactly that. You have to have sound, you have to have amplification. If you don't have amplification, you can certainly play acoustically, and that's fine.
What about contracts? Do you require all of them to sign contracts?
We do now. Yeah, we do now. We had kind of fly by the seat of our pants for a long time, actually. Just doing the thing. We're just going to hire you and pay you, and you're going to play. And a couple of times, it ran into some not problems by any means, but we had to negotiate. Like if there was weather, and you weren't going to open the tap room, or you weren't going to certainly have entertainment so that people were going to drive out and get killed coming to see a band play. It's crazy. So when we would call the band and say, "Hey guys, we got to cancel you tonight," now we pay them 50% of what we would normally pay if we have to cancel them. After 24 hours, we pay them their whole fee.
What's the going rate for most bands in the tap room? I'm not talking
We have two rates. There's only two rates that we have. We pay our anyone above a duo gets $700 to play at Treehouse, and a single and a duo gets $100 each for 3 hours. They get $100 an hour, so it ends up being about $600. Solo artist gets $100 an hour, so they get 3. Just, that's about the going rate. That's what an artist really wants to get, about $100 an hour. So that's what we've been paying. And we hadn't been paying that, and in the past 2 years went up to that, and everyone seems to be pretty happy with that.
Now, I'm going to skip down on this list of questions that we prepared and ask you something I ask any venue that uses live music, because I'm interested in their business and the economic model. You pay $700 to a band. How do you gauge, the ROI on that? Is it strictly, okay, well, we sold $800 worth of beer tonight, so done deal?
Right. Well, we don't really pay our bands to sell beer. We pay our bands to create a vibe, to make our customers happy, and make it a place that the people are coming to hang out and buy beer, want to do it again. And if that band is getting compensated well enough, they're going to create that vibe. And it's not quantifiable, really. You're going to pay a band $700. It's gone, and you're going to make that in an hour or two of selling beer anyway. So it's just not even anything we think about. When we do our live performances in our new facility, in our the House Theater in Deerfield, which I'm plugging for because it's a really cool venue. We're really, really excited.
It's a theater.
Yeah, it's a 200-person soundstage theater, and we had Warren Haynes play there Tuesday and Wednesday night this week, and it's just we're going to have some really, excuse my French, we're going to have some badass performers there, and we're really psyched about it.
Now, how do you come up with a price point on a ticket like that?
But that's the problem, is that we're new to the music industry, right? So performers aren't letting us charge. You can't charge a $200 ticket. There's only 200 seats. Our performers are charging $30,000 to $60,000. We don't make that money up in ticket sales. So, and I think that there's a lot of venues. There's a lot of people that do big concerts and big shows that wouldn't even think about putting on a show if they weren't making X amount of profit. But we're not putting on shows. We're a brewery, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create that brand, and it's so good for the brand to have 2 shows with Warren Haynes and have all of those people walk out and say, that was amazing, Treehouse is amazing.
Right.
And put it on Facebook and put it on Instagram and Twitter and all those things, and that's what it's for.
So you can't put a dollar figure on it.
Yeah, you can't quantify.
Yeah.
No.
I want to move on to something that, Dean's talking about booking some pretty high-priced acts, and some of you are in the business of just getting started, and, well, I can't bring in Amos Lee or Warren Haynes, or I don't even know if I can afford a $700 band, and I don't even know where to start. I can't just put an application on my website and think they're all going to come. So during the pandemic at BMI, we were trying to figure out ways to help some of our licensing customers and partners who were struggling mightily, and trying to figure out ways to bring music back sort of post-pandemic. So we started a partnership with an online booking agency called Gigmore. And the idea was to try and support the bars, the restaurants, the breweries, and helping them rebuild their live music program. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Gigmore. There's a bunch of them out there. There's Gig Salad. There's a couple of others. But we vetted them, and we found that Gigmore was the best when it comes to live music booking. The guy that started it is a musician himself, a guy named David Baird. And we initially started using our relationships with the associations, the Brewers Guilds, the restaurant associations, to promote this partnership. And what we did was we decided that if we're going to tell people how live music is a great driver of traffic to your brewery, we needed to provide an easy methodology for you to execute on that concept, and something that's scalable. So Gigmore is it's like Match.com for artists and venues, if you're not familiar with it. You go up there as a venue, you register, you say, hey, I want an R&B band to play at my venue on Saturday night. in Framingham, Mass, and it'll tell you all the R&B bands in Framingham, Mass that are available. You negotiate a rate, and you have them come in and perform. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy. They have a pretty rich website with a lot of artists. And we decided, in order to kind of jumpstart this partnership and this relationship, that any member of any of the associations we have partnerships with, this organization, of course, included, that we would provide $200 off of their first booking with Gigmore. So if there's anyone here that's been contemplating adding live music, but we're afraid of the costs associated, and it wants to do a beta test to see what happens and how it impacts their traffic, let me know. Come to me, give me your card, and I'll send you this coupon for you to try it. All I ask is you let me know after the fact, how did it go? Was it a smooth transaction? How was the band? Was it good? Did it work? Did it do anything for your brewery that night? Because we think that this partnership will be very helpful going forward when businesses are trying to add live music and don't know where to start. Now, before we open it up for questions, after you guys win all of your big awards tonight, we're bringing in Dwight Haggins and his band to perform as a give back for all that you do, and to thank this association for supporting BMI songwriters. Thank Paul, thank the staff. Dwight Haggins, actually, he's a BMI artist, a BMI songwriter, and Dwayne, did I say Dwight? Yeah. Oh, it even says Dwight. Oh my God. It's the second typo I gotta fix. What? Did you see that? Did you see that? You should have stopped me.
Yeah, I only heard it.
Yeah. Dwayne Haggins. Yeah, I don't know why. Anyways, Dwayne Haggins came to me through, actually through Dean, because we were putting together a list of bands for Paul and the staff to look at, and I said to Dean, do you know anybody that might be good for this? And so, at any rate, you're gonna love him. He's gonna help you all celebrate, and it's just a thank you for all that you do. It's a way to give back in a small way. So now we open it up for questions. But before I call on you, I just want to say the number one question I'm always asked, I'm going to answer it now. Do I have to get licenses with all 4 performing rights organizations? That's always the question. And Dean says he has them with 4 of them.
I just do.
The problem is that the answer is, unless you want to put somebody on your staff that's responsible for tracking all of the music that's played in your brewery, and going on the websites and looking up the repertoire information, which, by the way, is available. You can find out who wrote what song and who they're affiliated with by going to BMI and ASCAP's website, CSAC's website. But that's a heck of an undertaking. Because the problem is a lot of this music that you've got, being publicly performed has been co-written. Music is about collaboration a lot these days, and particularly in the country music genre. All songs were co-written, and usually it's an ASCAP songwriter with a BMI writer, maybe a CSAC songwriter was involved as well. So it's very difficult. And so the easiest way to not worry about it is to take license agreements with all 3 of the organizations. What are the costs affiliated with that? As a guesstimate, if you've got a 125-person tap room, our fees and ASCAP's fees are based upon the fire code number. So if you're doing live music and you got 125, 30-person fire code number, you might be paying BMI $375, ASCAP $375, and CSAC a couple hundred maybe. So in the end, maybe it's $800, $900, $1,000 a year for peace of mind and not to have to worry about managing what's being played in your brewery. So that's the most popular question. I'm sorry, go ahead. When you say selecting music, are you talking about?
If I want to have a mix background in my,
Oh, well,
do I just
if I were you,
a Spotify
Yeah.
commercial?
I would go to a commercial music service, and there are many, 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 many of them, as I showed earlier in the slide. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of them, and they're fairly inexpensive. It's not a whole lot of money. And if that's all you're planning on doing is just creating an ambiance and a vibe, you're not going to do live music, you just want some cool music in the background, then you can program the channels that you want. It's almost like, XM Sirius, you can choose Oh, it's a 70s vibe tonight. We'll just play 70s music. And the good news about that is that it's all pre-licensed. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to deal with BMI, ASCAP, or CSAC. Then you will have to get licenses on your own.
Just before the next question comes, just so I don't forget to do this, and I've been thinking about it for 4 days, that it's something I wanted to get out to everybody. If you have a friend or a family member or yourself as a singer, songwriter, performer, make sure that you get yourself registered with BMI so that you can get paid for it. It's the easiest peasiest thing in the whole wide world, and it's money that's out there for those kids, those adults, those people that are performing. It might not pay your mortgage, but it's money that's out there, and if you submit those after every time you play, it works. Just wanted to say that.
And it's free.
Go ahead. And it's free.
Yes. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I kind of brushed over that. I'll be more specific because this is important. You pay the fees, you want to make sure they're going to the right place. Technology has not quite gotten there yet. Hopefully someday it will, that we can't track every single song played at every single brewery and every single festival and every single, every cover song played at every restaurant. So what we do is that we take all the licensing fees that we collect from the radio industry, and we take all the licensing fees we collect from the hospitality industry, the restaurants, the bars, the hotels, the breweries, the wineries, and we put that in the same pot of money. And then we use Shazam technology, because we have listening stations in all the markets across the country where we can recognize the digital footprint in the song and pretty much accurately determine how many spins a song gets. And so the general feeling is that what's being played in a restaurant, bar, or brewery is reflective of what's being played in the radio. There's some classic rock, they match up with the formats in radio. So we use the Shazam survey information, or not survey, but actual results, to pay out those licensing fees that you pay. With the one exception, what I was talking about before, is you may have local singer-songwriters that aren't just playing covers, but playing their own original music that doesn't show up on the radio station. It's not being played in the mainstream. They don't have record deals. They're the ones that must upload their set lists after they perform through, if they're BMI, through an app called BMI Live, so that we take a portion of those licensing fees that you pay BMI and make sure that goes to that singer-songwriter that you're trying to support locally. And it's very important. I mean, Dwayne Haggins is a great example. I said to him, hey, I hope you're using the BMI Live program. He goes, what? I didn't know anything about it. And he plays in bars and restaurants all over New England. So it's important. That's a great question. It's not huge money. It's, I would say that if they're doing 150 to 200 gigs a year, and they report all of their original music, they can make $3,000 or $4,000 a year. It's gas money. It's money that can help cover some of their expenses. It's not huge money. It's not the kind of money they would get if their songs were on the radio, because that's the ultimate payout. But it's worth something for sure. Yes, sir.
And how do you, just to follow up here to this one, and how do you know then what they played that night?
They take their set list and they upload it to us.
All right, so for that particular day?
Yep. Yep. And sometimes it's always the same set list, so it's easy for them. They just push a button every night because they know they played the same originals they played the night before.
What breweries started playing music on Wednesdays at we have a Steinway section, and so the artists that we have, some of that, right? We have also Spotify, business. We're told that the license fees,
Yep.
so we should be safe.
Yep.
But for us, the question was, okay, we have like $300 gigs, like we know like the rest of the time we don't play. So one day a week or twice a week or?
There are. Yeah, there's a à la carte menu where you check and say, I have music twice a week, or 3 times a week, or 5 times a week, and the fees will be based upon how many times a week in connection with what your occupancy is.
My question is basically, talk also to other breweries that with one. What protects us also from another organization that just comes up and says, hey, we want some money. I don't have a problem with BMI. SCAP is also a situation that, I know Neil Diamond has his own right here.
Oh, Neil Diamond's with CSAC.
Oh, that's CSAC.
Yeah. So what prohibits somebody from starting their own performing rights organization? Well, as we heard, nothing. I mean, Irving Azoff did it, but it's hard because you've got to create an infrastructure to not only do the licensing, but track the performances. And so I guess my answer to you is, if you're contacted by a performing rights organization, in addition to what you already have in place, and you're concerned about its validity, please, reach out to me. I'm happy to give advice and consultation on non-BMI related stuff. There is a company called Alltracks that's been aggressively pursuing businesses. Their catalog is nothing that you're going to be performing. They represent a lot of obscure music, but the way they present it is, you need a license with us. We're a performing rights organization. So you raise a good point. I mean, there's nothing that prohibits anybody from coming to you and saying, hey, I represent songwriters, I want money. All I can tell you is that you can certainly reach out to me if you're concerned about that.
Thank you. And then we have with this and also other breweries was, the pandemic, right? We all can do without it, but like sometimes we would.
Yep.
And then I know one brewery who actually money back because
Yeah.
they're clearly not,
Yeah.
right? So fortunately, none of the 4 organizations that they contact.
I'm disappointed to hear, because we spent a lot of time providing relief to our customers. And if that's the case, please share my contact information with that brewery. If they feel like they were shortchanged and they were charged during the pandemic when they shut down live music, please have them reach out to me, because we had a team of folks we had a special hotline set up for people that are looking for COVID relief because they shut down their live music program. So I'm disappointed to hear that they didn't get a response. I'm sorry to hear that.
And then for us in particular, it's still like with being open after COVID again. Yes, fire rated 280 of
I know.
Effectively, we have
I know.
140 seats. Don't really have guests standing. Plus, it's like we had top performers, and we had 4. And it eased up a little bit, but when we have 70 or 90 people coming.
Yeah.
Pay no licensing fees, but honestly.
Right.
We're
Right.
not working with the 280 number. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I can't advise you on the ROI of whether you should be doing live music. But what I can say is that the reason why the fees are based upon fire code numbers is because it's something that's easily trackable, and because we couldn't send in people into every single bar, restaurant, brewery and look and see, well, there's 150 fire code number, but they only have 70 here, and we don't want to do a percentage of revenue license, which is what we do with the radio industry, because you don't want somebody coming in and looking at your books. And so that was just kind of the compromise with the industry. It was like, let's do something that's trackable.
Well, when it was time to spread out, have separators, use only.
Well, if that's the case, if you did something special like that, where you created a separate entity within your brewery, where you kind of had to open a door and go into a different room to listen to music, that's a compelling case that you could share with me or with my colleagues and say, hey, these performances were only taking place in half the brewery, and the rest of the brewery couldn't hear it.
5 minutes or so.
Okay. Was there some? Yes, sir.
Have you considered?
Yes, we do have one. I think it's 7 or more.
Is it based?
Um,
And everybody's different, I talked to them all.
it's, I can get you an answer. I couldn't tell you specifically. It's certainly the rates are less if you've got 7 or more. It's based upon tonnage, obviously. But if you want to give me your card, I'll get that answer for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't do a contract for our musicians at this time. I'm finding that first-time musicians are bringing in lots of family, lots of friends, but then sometimes repeat out them to their own advertising, and if it's a quiet night, there's contracts or in contracts, do you just putting in must bring in X number of people, must have friends, sell X number or buy
That's definitely a model that a lot of the nightclubs and
Yep.
bars use.
Yeah, there's a lot of contracts that have, you have to bring in a 50 person door.
You don't do that, though.
Oh, we actually tell our artists not to bring fans. Don't.
Yeah. Fans, but.
Or don't, people aren't coming to our brewery to see a show, an artist. The shows that we have in Deerfield are ticketed, so people are buying tickets for those. But in Charlton, there's an influx of 3,000 to 5,000 people every couple of hours. So we don't want the artists to even bring their families and friends and fans. They get the opportunity to have 5,000 people see them that haven't seen them before. So it's good. But I know what you're saying. You depend on those artists to draw for you. You should put it in a contract.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll give you my card. And let me just say, too, that and I always try and emphasize this. I think I already said it once, but if you have issues or problems that are music licensing related, please feel free to use me as a resource. And also, let me tell you up front that a lot of the behavior that's exhibited by some of these performing rights organizations can be very unpleasant. And I apologize if some of it is coming from BMI. I mean, sometimes we have overzealous people that are in the business of trying to sell licenses, and selling intellectual property is not an easy thing, but if you're being treated poorly and you feel that it's inappropriate on how they're approaching you, please reach out. We try and work on customer service on a daily basis because you're going to be our partners, our customers in the long term. And so if you feel like someone's behaving inappropriately, I hope you'll let me know, or tell Paul, and you can tell me, because that's wrong, and it's what's put a stain on our industry. It poisons the whole category. Whether it's BMI or CSAC that's engaging in it, if anybody's doing it, it's wrong. Yes, sir.
The licensing for live music.
Yep.
When we went, that was the only. Just for that once a month.
Give me your card. Let me see what I can do. Yes.
Not a brewery, but do you guys have a checklist for?
Great idea. We'd have to, I think working with Dean, the two of us could put something like that together, because what I wanted to do with this presentation, as I told Paul, it's not the sexiest thing in the world to say, come and find out how to avoid being sued for copyright. I said, maybe we get a better audience if we could also focus on how to make live music work for you and do it legally. And so you make a great point, is that we're about well, it does, and it should be something that everybody looks at when they first, just when you start a business. I need this license for that. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So, we got a license with BMI because you're associated.
Right.
And it was. The other organization.
Very good question.
So
I can't answer that.
you're kind of speaking for them as well in your presentation, but
I
all they
speak.
do is emails and
just touched on the bane of my existence, because everything that we do right, they benefit from. Everything they do wrong, we're hurt by. Do I think they all should have discount programs? Of course. You know, one of the reasons why we are more, like I said, we have warts too. This isn't all about how great we are. But we're more customer focused is because our board is made up of customers of BMI. We were created by customers of BMI, by the radio industry. Our board are the CEOs of major radio and TV companies. And they say, you need to service your customers and constituents professionally. Whereas ASCAP is made up of a board of songwriters and publishers. They're all about just getting as much money as they can through the door. So they don't have industry relations people. I wouldn't be able to have this job, there's not an equivalent job like this at ASCAP. So you're absolutely 100% right. A lot of the things, I'm getting into the weeds now, but we created a code of conduct that we put on our website that says how we should treat customers. You can find it, it's searchable on our website. You know, our behavior should be professional, this and this and that. We try to get the other PRs to do the same thing, and it's been like pulling teeth. So your message is received. I don't know how to answer it. Yep. Yep.
How does that play into?
Well, if you have an open mic night and the 10 participants, none of them are affiliated with Performing Arts Organization. Kind of the example that we're talking about. But they're playing cover songs. That's your responsibility as a brewer. Some people would say, that's not fair. If I've got a U2 tribute band playing at my brewery on Saturday night, why are they not responsible for paying the songwriters of those compositions? The way the copyright law was written was that whoever is benefiting from the performance, where it's emanating from, there is a responsibility. So in the case of that, you would need a license because those cover songs. Now, if they only came up and played originals, and no one was affiliated with any performing arts organization, you need a license for that. But yeah, it's due diligence of talking to them when they come and say, look, I don't want to be in the business of telling you to avoid licensing fees, but I also know that your budgets are tight. If you're trying to avoid licensing fees, but you want music, then you have a vetting process. When someone comes in and wants to play on Thursday nights, you say, okay, you can't play any covers, and you must play only originals, and you cannot be affiliated with the Performing Arts Organization. Now, that's not necessarily songwriter friendly. That's not great for them, but that's good for you, because you don't have to bear any responsibility in the licensing.
If you bring someone on, and do people know, like, if you only have a contract with DMI, can you say to a songwriter or a music group?
I mean, our whole catalog is on our website. You can point them in that direction. The problem is if they don't stick to just a BMI only playlist, it's the brewery's responsibility. It's not theirs. So they're like, oh, let's throw in a Springsteen song. Well, that's on the brewery. That's not on them. But yeah, it's possible. I mean, if you wanted to set an example and say, we just want BMI music played, someone's going to have to go in and monitor that. And it's not an easy proposition, but there's a lot of songs that are just BMI only. It's just going through the process of vetting all of that. Yes, ma'am.
When I first got the BMI license, and a lot of the songs are represented by BMI. And there would be two people.
And it's like, do you want to sort of hamstring your ability to play what you want to play?
BMI has half the song.
Right, exactly, half the song. But it's all on, there's a website called, on BMI.com, it takes you directly to SongsView, which lists, it's a catalog of all the songs that are out there. You can find out who's affiliated with them. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate the questions.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan.